Kia ora, and welcome to the Beer Jerk Beer of the Week drink along with Matt.
And with Luke.
Today we're drinking a beer from our old pals at Urbanaut. So if you've been a Beer Jerk Beer of the Week subscriber for a while, you'll know all about Urbanaut, and they're one of our favourites. I think we've had maybe more Urbanaut beers in our box than most breweries because they're great.
And we used to live in their basement.
Yeah, so they're based just down the road at the other end of the Auckland Beer Mile. And a few years ago when Beer Jerk was growing and we had to move out of mine and Brent's front rooms, we got a storage locker for a while in Ponsonby, and then I just happened across this warehouse that was being, having some construction work done on it, and I popped in to see if they might have some spare space, and it was actually Simon from Urbanaut, and he told me he was building a brewery. So we rented space in there downstairs and shared their chiller for a year or two maybe.
Yeah, well, I think I was in there for almost a year before we moved into the Fridge and Flagon where we are now, just down the road. So had my little desk next to their boiler, which would periodically spit steam on me, and
those are the days.
And blocking in all their delivery trucks with our little van. So anyway, enough about our times at Urbanaut. Cheers.
So Urbanaut was started by three old school friends. So it's Simon and Thomas and Bruce. So Simon and Thomas used to work together. They had sort of, I think it's like a development construction type
stuff
thing. And Bruce worked as a brewer and specialised in packaging.
So he was doing a lot of work over in the UK for breweries like Fuller's and Meantime. So some big name breweries over there. And as Luke said, specialising in packaging. So you may have seen from Urbanaut recently some of their living beer series, which are canned conditioned ales. I believe they're still the only brewery in New Zealand who have canned conditioned any beers, except perhaps Garage Project, who I think some of their Wild Workshop stuff might be canned conditioned as well, Pilgrim's Blend and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's a technical and hard thing to do because cans are a little less forgiving on can conditioning. But anyway, we're not here to talk about can conditioning today. We're here to talk about this espresso Scotch ale. Now, Scotch ale is a really interesting style. I'm a big fan of it, and it's a really broad style. So it's a style that embraces alcohol percentages from the kind of 2s, 3s, 4s in a lighter Scotch ale, up to something like 8, 9, 10, and I think it's around 8ish, 8.5. Yeah. So this is 8.5, and really the bones behind a Scotch ale is it's a kind of rich, sweet, sometimes smoky brown ale, where you get lots of kind of toffee and caramel and that kind of really chewy, flavorful malt sweetness coming through, which it does shine through in this one.
Well, when pale ales were really taking off in England around 150 years ago, the English brewers could get pale malt because they used Coke for their maltings, and also they had some really good quality hops from Kent. Whereas all the way up in Scotland, they obviously weren't growing hops, and it was just expensive to get hold of hops. So that's sort of the birth of Scotch ale. It's beers that are a little bit darker, a little bit maltier, more rounded sweetness, but it's just such a broad style. It's not as extreme as table beer. We won't get back into table beer. But when you go to Scotland, you'll come across lots of Scotch ales that are delineated by how many shillings they would have cost in the olden days, which related to their strength. So you have a 40 shilling, a 60 shilling, an 80 shilling.
And you'll still find them referred to in lots of places as shilling ales. And it's a way of denoting those differences in alcohol percentage, because one of the things that was often done with the Scotch ale is you would initially brew your strong Scotch ale, which I believe was the 80 shilling, and then after brewing that, you would run kind of rehydrate the grain and spard through that again to create your second Scotch ale. So with the second running, and then sometimes even the third running. So you'd make 1, 2, or even 3 sometimes beers from the same lot of grain, and they would get there's less sugar each time, so you get weaker and weaker as you go down, which is a really interesting way to brew, and an experiment that we're going to try and do at some point in the future. We just need to find a brewery who's willing to faff about and do it for us.
Yeah, it makes a small beer. So yeah, I was hesitating for a moment then because I was last in Scotland 3 years ago, so it's been a while, and there weren't many good Scotch ales around that I came across. Although it wasn't an exhaustive trip, so I'm looking forward to getting back there maybe later this year and seeing what the Scotch ale scene is like, as there are so many fantastic craft breweries that are more focused on IPAs and more the modern things. But we've seen a few interesting interpretations of Scotch ales recently, and it's a nice base that works with other flavours and adjuncts. So this is working so nicely with the just the smoothness of the coffee flavours. It's got really lovely coffee aroma that goes with those, the toffee notes, the bready sort of notes, the real. Yeah, I can imagine a toffee version of this that you hit with your little toffee hammer as a good complimentary snack.
Yeah, well, for me, the toffee note on the malt is a note that I'm a huge fan of, and so I try and build into a lot of the dark beers and brown beers that I brew. Is that kind of really kind of rich, chewy carameliness that they've really captured here, and that coffee note. I got it really strongly on the first mouthful, but it's kind of mellowed and smoothed in a little bit as I'm getting through the glass there. So you've got that kind of slight roastiness. There's almost a slight smokiness to it as well, which isn't my favourite accent, but kind of works quite well with that sweetness, and it is to style. So that's definitely coming through as well.
And it is the coffee in there is just perfectly balanced, and I'm trying not to drink this 125ml really fast because actually the flavour will change as it warms. So definitely a beer like this shouldn't be served straight from the fridge. It should be more like cellar temperature, so maybe like 12 degrees or thereabouts, and you'll notice that you get a lot more aromatics and much more flavour out of a beer like this at warmer temperatures.
Yeah, and speaking of that 125ml, you'll notice the dinky little can here. This is a beer in Urbanaut's Big Beer Small Can series, which is something that I've been advocating for a long time. I'm really happy that they're doing it. Because basically what they're doing is all their big, strong beers, so we've seen an Imperial Saisons, Imperial Sours, Imperial Stouts, all those kind of 8% plus beers they're putting into these little cans. And to me, it's the perfect serving size for a beer like this. I have so many 500ml, 650ml, 750ml Imperial Stouts and stuff in my cellar at home and in the fridge.
Bragging.
I've got a cellar that I just never get around to drinking because most of my mates aren't as into beer as me and don't want to share them with me, and it's too much to drink by myself. A lot of those are kind of 9+ standard drinks, and like I don't want it to be the only. It's going to take me a long time to drink that beer, and it's going to leave me pretty off kilter by the end of it. Whereas this is still 1.7 standard drinks, which is not that too far off a 440ml of like a 6% IPA or something like that. So it's definitely a beer that you can have one of. Whereas if they're taking the route that a lot of breweries do and put it into a 500ml or a 750ml, probably wouldn't be opening that very often. So I really like that they're putting those kind of beers that I really love to drink but can't drink often enough because they're in packages that are too big into those 250ml cans. So good on you, Urbanaut.
Well, we'll line up a mini bottle share with Joe on Friday so we can help you get through your backlog.
Alright, sweet, we'll do.
And this little can of coffee beer reminds me of so Urbanaut throw really good parties, and every year they have a really fun birthday party. So I think it was last year's one, unless maybe COVID cancelled it. But anyway, a recent party was in Whammy Bar, which is a great bar in Craighappy Road in the basement. It's real dark and dingy. And the guys packaged up a load of these little miniature cans with espresso martini. And I think it was just espresso and vodka, basically. It was like rocket fuel. It wasn't a beer, it was just a cocktail with chucks in a can, and that was really good fun.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a bit more of a more refined version of that.
Yeah. But yeah, Urbanaut and their party gang are definitely a really good time and some awesome people to hang out with and to support. Recently, they've just got the on license at their brewery on New North Road in Morningside, up here in Auckland on the Beer Mile. So rather than just going in for tasting paddles, you can go and get full pints there now, alongside some incredible smash burgers from Jamie, formerly of Toasted As. If ever had the toasties here at the Fridge and Flagon, they were his toasties. But he's set up the kitchen now at Urbanaut now, and it's a really cool place to pop by for the afternoon, grab an incredible burger, and they've got lots of beers on the list that you don't normally see around. They do some experimental stuff that doesn't make it out to the public, so it's really worth going down there, grabbing a pint, grabbing an awesome burger, and having a little party with the party gang.
So thank you to the Urbanaut Party Gang for making such a fantastic beer and just being rad people all around. And what other news do we have? We've got some events coming up.
We do. I think we touched on this last week.
We lied though. We told them the wrong date for Nanofest.
Well, we don't tell them the truth.
Yeah.
We don't deserve it.
It hadn't been printed yet. It's on Facebook now, so it's all locked in.
Nanofest is not on Facebook yet.
Oh, isn't it?
Haven't got around to it. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're getting the sneaky advance notice. We're in chronological order. The next event that we've got happening here at the Fridge and Flagon is it Scott?
Yeah, I think it's Behind the Brews with Deep Creek, which is happening on the Thursday, the 28th of April. I'm doing this blind, so don't quote me on this.
I'd look at my phone, but my phone's filming us, so.
Following from that, so that's going to be a ticketed event, $50 to go through the history of Deep Creek Brewery with Scott Taylor, who's been there since the beginning. It'll be a tasting through the history of the brewery, tasting some of their most important beers, reminiscing about stories and how they got started, where they are now. So we just did recently one of those with Soren from 8 Wired, and everyone who came along had a really great time at that. It's an awesome tasting, an evening of stories with Deep Creek and some fantastic beers.
It's a really fun, easygoing event, and it's just hosted by me having a nice conversation with Scott, and pumping him for information and secrets about all the. Well, he's not going to know so much about the recipes because obviously it's Hamish the brewer.
Yeah.
But I might get him to do a bit of research on Basilica so we can get some brew secrets on that.
Yeah, absolutely. When are we doing Fresh Up?
We're doing Fresh Up on.
I think it might be before Behind the Brews.
Not the 30th.
Not the 30th, before that.
You tell them about another event and I'll get my laptop.
All right, professionalism in action here. We also have a little Fresh Up event. So as you know, it's Fresh Up season now. We've got our Fresh Up mix cases going on. And normally we do a bus trip, which goes around 5 Auckland bars, but didn't feel safe to do that this year. So we're just hosting a little mini version of Fresh Up at the Fridge and Flagon. We're going to be cherry picking some of the most interesting and coolest looking Fresh Up beers from this season's harvest, and we'll be making those available on tap here, so you can come by and get a little taster of the harvest on the
Saturday 23rd of April.
So we fell out on our chronological order at the first hurdle there. So 23rd of April we've got Fresh Up, 28th we've got Scott from Deep Creek coming in.
Behind the Brews.
Then on the 30th, I believe.
We need to pull back a bit.
Why
because we've got an event this Saturday, which is...
We really did fail chronological order, didn't we?
Ali doesn't watch this, right?
No.
Of course she doesn't.
Oh, she knows.
Ah, you told her.
Yeah, well, anyway.
So, Small Gods have brewed a beer. It's the first in our Constellation series of dark beers that are not necessarily pastry focused, the sort of lighter bodied dark beers. So we've made a Baltic Porter.
Well, not necessarily lighter bodied, I would say, but kind of dark chocolate inspired rather than kind of big sugary pastry boys.
Yeah, grown-up stouts rather than stouts for kids.
Grown-up adjunct imperial stouts. So this one is a Black Forest Gatto Baltic Porter, named after my daughter Lyra. And the
Constellation.
And the Constellation Lyra. But this is we collaborated with Citizen on this beer, who are specialists in sustainability and rescuing ingredients. So we used a bunch of rescued Central Otago cherries, some Dutch cocoa, tom and vanilla, and no lactose, to make a kind of really kind of interesting and characterful Baltic Porter. Was lagered for 6 weeks to give it kind of a really clean, crisp finish. It's drier than a lot of the other big imperial dark beers that you'll see, so that's going to be delicious. And it's going to be served here on Saturday alongside some Black Forest Gatto.
And that's going to be, it was a really fun brew. It was great working with Donald from Citizen, just such a wonderful guy, just so many cool ideas. And yes, Saturday's going to be a real family-friendly day. So bring your kids along, eat some cake, drink some Baltic Porter.
Yeah, so that's going to be good.
Then, so that's Saturday, 9th of April. Then we got Behind the Brews, we talked about enough. We've got Fresh Up happening. Then we're doing a half marathon, which, I don't know. So Saturday, 30th of April, we've got the Beer Jug Half Marathon with the Beer Jug Run Club. And that's going to be running all around this area. And then we're going to have a fun afternoon of, drinking mainly, but maybe a few pub games and that sort of thing. So check our socials. We'll be putting more details out about the half marathon, how you can get involved, how you can join, how you can get a t-shirt. Then Nanofest.
So we touched on Nanofest last week. It's going to be a celebration of some of New Zealand's smallest breweries. We've got some incredible beers lined up for that, which is going to be super exciting. Some of our mates have pulled some interesting stuff out of their cellars and out of their back catalogues, which I think we talked a bit about last week, but we'll talk more about in the weeks coming up.
Saturday, 14th of May.
And then on the 21st of May, the following week,
Yep.
We have Wildstock returning. Wildstock's a really exciting event that we have put on for the last few years. I think last year we skipped it for obvious reasons. With Jules Van Costello of Cult Wines and now Known Unknown Wines. So it's a celebration of spontaneous and wild fermentation across beer and wine. So you can come along and try a bunch of natural wines, orange wines, pet nats, alongside some funky, bready, sour, wild, and spontaneous, interesting ferments from some of our favourite breweries.
And we're pretty broad with what we define as wild, so it's not necessarily just wild ferment, it's beers that are just a bit crazy. So if you're not into sours, there's also going to be some really tasty stuff made with, forage mushrooms and just anything that's a bit out there. We pulled together for Wildfest. So every year when we do it, it's always a really delicious event. And it's just interesting seeing what's happening in wine as well. It's sort of changing and there's new stuff happening every year. So that's one of the only times I really get to drink wine each year. So I really love Wildstock.
Cool. So we're trickling those events out on Facebook, so keep an eye out. And those tickets for Behind the Brews are on sale now.
Yep.
So if you find the Facebook event, there's a ticket link there, so you can come along to that. On Saturday, you can just rock up, and we'll be posting details about the others in a short time.
Well, thanks for joining us, Sam. Cheers, Matt.
Cheers. Nice and organised as ever. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.